Jesper, who herded the hares. There was once a king who ruled over a kingdom somewhere between sunrise and sunset. It was as small as kingdoms usually were in old times, and when the king went up to the roof of his palace and took a look around, he could see to the ends of it in every direction. But as it was all his own, he was very proud of it, and often wondered how it would get along without him. He had an only child, and that was a daughter, so he foresaw that she must be provided with a husband who would be fit to be the king after him. Where to find one rich enough and clever enough to be a suitable match for the princess was really what troubled him, and often kept him awake at night. At last, he devised a plan. He made a proclamation over all his kingdom, and asked his nearest neighbors to publish it in theirs as well, that whoever could bring him a dozen of the finest pearls the king had ever seen, and could perform tasks that would be set by him, should have his daughter in marriage, and in due time succeed him to the throne. The pearls, he thought, could only be brought by a very wealthy man, and the task would resume unusual talents to accomplish them. I have a very specific set of talents. Oh well. There were plenty who tried to fulfill the terms which the king had proposed. Rich merchants and foreign princes presented themselves one after the other, so that some days the number of them was quite annoying. But though they could all produce the magnificent pearls, not one of them could perform even the simplest of tasks he had set. And since they could not, no, no. Some turned up, too, who were mere adventurers, and tried to deceive the old king with imitation pearls, but he was not to be taken in so easily, and they were soon sent about their business. At the end of several weeks, the stream of suitors began to fall off, and still there was no prospect of a suitable son-in-law. Now, it so happened that in a little corner of the there lived a poor fisher who had 3 sons, and their sons' names were Peter, Paul, and Jesper. Peter and Paul were grown men, while Jesper was just coming into manhood. The 2 elder brothers were much bigger and stronger than the youngest, but Jesper was far the cleverest of the 3, though neither Peter nor Paul would admit to this. It was this fact, however, that we shall see in the course of our story. One day the fisherman went out fishing, and among his catch for the day he brought home 3 dozen oysters. When these were opened, every shell was found to contain a large and beautiful pearl. Hereupon the 3 brothers, at one time or another, fell upon the idea of offering themselves as suitors to the princess. After some discussion, it was agreed that the pearl should be divided by the lot, and that each of them should have his chance in order of his age. Of course, if the oldest was successful, the other 2 would be saved the trouble of even trying. The next morning, Peter put his pearls in a little basket and set off for the king's palace. He had not gone far on his way when he came upon the king of the ants and the king of the beetles, who, with their armies behind them, were facing off each other and preparing for battle. "Come and help me," said the king of the ants. "The beetles are too big for us. I may help you out some day in return." I have no time to waste on other people's affairs, said Peter. Just fight away as best you can. And with that he walked off and left them. A little further on the way he met an old woman. "Good morning, young man," she said. "You are easily a stir. What have you got in your basket?" "Cinders," said Peter promptly, and walking on, adding to himself, "Take that for being so inquisitive." "Very well, cinders it be," the old woman called after him, but he pretended not to hear her. Very soon he reached the palace, and was at once brought before the king. When the king took the cover off of the basket, the king and all his courtiers said with one voice that these were the finest pearls they'd ever seen, and they could not take their eyes off of them. But then a strange thing happened. The pearls began to lose their whiteness and grew quite dim in color. Then they grew blacker and blacker till at last they were so much as many cinders. Peter was so amazed that he could say nothing for himself, but the king said quite enough for both, and Peter was glad to get away home again as fast as his legs could carry him. To his father and brothers, however, he gave no account of his attempt, except that it had been a failure. Next day, Paul set out with his luck. He soon came upon the king of the ants and the king of the beetles, who with their armies had encamped on the field of battle all night, and were ready to begin to fight again. "Come and help me," said the king of the ants. "We've got the worst of it yesterday, and maybe some help in return." "I don't care if you do the worst of it today, too," said Paul. "I have more important business on hand than mixing up with your peril." So he walked on, and presently the same old woman met him. "Good morning," she said. "What have you got in your basket?" "Cinders," said Paul, who was quite as insolent as his brother, and quite as anxious to teach other people good manners. "Very well, cinders be it," the old woman shouted after him, but Paul neither looked back nor answered her. He thought more of what she said, however, after his pearls also turned to cinders before the eyes of the king and the court. Then he lost no time in getting home again, and was very sulky when he asked if he had been successful. The third day came, and with it came Jesper's turn to try his fortune. He got up and had his breakfast, while Peter and Paul lay in bed and made rude remarks, telling him that he would come back quicker than they went, for if they had failed, it could not be supposed that he would succeed. Jesper made no reply, but put his pearls in the little basket and walked off. The king of the ants and the king of the beetles were again marshaling their hosts, but the ants were greatly reduced in numbers and had little hope of holding out the day. "Come and help us," said the king to Jesper. "We shall be completely defeated. I may help you some day in return." Now, Jesper had always heard that ants spoken of as clever and industrious little creatures, while he had never heard anyone say good words about beetles. So he agreed to give the wished-for help, and at first charge he made, the ranks of the beetles broke and fled in dismay, and those escaped best that they were nearest a hole, and could get away before Jesper's boots came down upon them. In a few minutes the ants had the field to themselves, and their king made quite an eloquent speech to Jesper, thanking him for the service he had done them, and promising to assist Jesper with any difficulty in the future. Just call on me when you want me, he said. Wherever you are, I'm never far away from anywhere, and if I can possibly help you, I shall not fail to do so. Jesper was inclined to just laugh this off, but he kept a grave face, and he would remember the offer, and walked on. At a good turn in the road, suddenly he came upon the old woman. Good morning, said she. What have you got in your basket? Pearls, said Jesper. I'm going to the palace to win the princess with them. And in case she might not believe him, he lifted the cover and let her see them. Beautiful, said the old woman. Very beautiful indeed, but they will go a very little way towards the princess, unless you can also perform the tasks that are set you. However, she said, I see you have brought something with you to eat. Won't you give me some of that if you're sure to get a good dinner at the palace? Oh, yes, of course, said Jesper. I hadn't thought of that. And he handed off the whole of his lunch to the woman. It had only taken a few steps on his way again when the old woman called him back. Yeah, she said. Take this whistle in return for your lunch. It isn't much to look at, but if you blow it, anything that you have lost or that has been taken from you will find its way back to you in a moment. Jesper thanked her for the whistle, though he did not see what use it would be to him just then, but he held on to it in his way to the palace. When Jesper presented his pearls to the king, there were exclamations of wonder and delight from everyone who saw them. It was not pleasant, however, to discover that Jesper was a mere fisher lad, and that wasn't the kind of son-in-law that the king had expected. And he said to the queen, "Oh, never mind," said she. "You can easily set him such tasks as he will never be able to perform, and soon get rid of them." "Yes, of course," said the king. "Really, I forget things nowadays, with all the bustle we had of late." That day Jesper dined with the king and queen and their nobles, and at night was put into a bedroom grander than anything of the kind he had ever seen. It was all so new to him that he could not sleep a wink, especially as he was always wondering what kind of tasks would be set to him and whether he would be able to perform them. In spite of the softness of the bed, he was very glad when morning came. After breakfast was over, the king said to Jesper, "Just come with me, and I'll show you what you must do first." So I can't think of any reason why it'd be echoing.